Welcome. We couldn't be more thrilled to be here, second year in a row in Paris. If you're familiar with ForgeRock's Digital Identity Summit, these are all about driving digital transformation, as Ismet said, digital revolution through identity. And really using that not only as a security opportunity, but also as a real digital enablement opportunity as well. So we've run these before, obviously, last year here in Paris in this facility. But since then, we've been in Dusseldorf, Germany in the spring. We've been in Austin, Texas. We've been in Sydney, Australia, London, and then again here in Paris. So we couldn't be more thrilled to host you all on this journey and this dialogue around digital transformation and using identity to get there. You know, one of the most important elements and value drivers for meetings like this are really for you to hear from your peers on stage about how they're transforming their business through identity and how they're thinking about it and how they're building their infrastructure and what are their strategies to deploy in new ways, new interesting ways that drive business. So one of the key values is absolutely our agenda today, and that is hearing from your peers in industry, be it in banking or retail or government or whatever it happens to be, how they're changing their world through identity. So we're thrilled with our guests on stage later today. I should also mention, though, some of the greatest value can be during breaks, lunch, and during our reception later today, sharing amongst your peers intimately about your own journeys, et cetera, as well. And that's what this event is really all about. This event is about sharing that innovation agenda and helping us all get there together. So with that, let's get started. So I think we're mostly all familiar with this analogy. You know, is this the light at the end of the tunnel, or is this a train bearing down on us? And our world that we deal with is not linear like it used to be. You know, we used to think about how you have one security element that you're authenticating and authorizing and driving some connection to. But with everything coming online, our world really looks much more like this. It is everything coming online, everything is connected. And certainly that is a dramatic security challenge for us, for all of us together. But it's also an amazing opportunity, because as these things come online, we have new ways of connecting intelligence, both security, but also from the standpoint of enabling a more precise, intelligent dialogue with our customers. So let's set the stage. Let's watch a really short video that will give you some context of what I'm talking about.
Identity and access management started as a simple security thing. When an employee logged into payroll, for example, the system would check their identity, make sure they're legit, and look to see what they have access to. But if the same employee wanted access to expense reporting, they had to log into that program separately and do it all over again. This got really annoying really fast. Now, identity platforms can assign employees a digital identity to represent them company-wide, so they only have to log in once. In fact, their digital identity stays the same no matter where they log in, on mobile phones, computers, wearable devices, appliances, or connected cars. Consumer companies want in on the identity action too, so their customers can have unique, secure digital identities on the web, in an app, or on any other personal device. Digital identities carry information about every unique customer. It's important to protect this personal data, but it's also a great opportunity for personalization. Retailers can see order history and suggest merchandise or targeted discounts. Insurers can offer incentive packages. And car companies can note preferences like seat settings, temperature, and playlists, whether the driver's in their car, a rental, or a cab. But now, it's not just people connecting to the internet. Lots of devices, connected cars, appliances, and machines are getting online. From the thermostat to security cameras to smartwatches, refrigerators, you name it. They interact with services like utility metering, home monitoring, health tracking, grocery ordering, and more, creating complex digital identity relationships that all tie back to an individual. ForgeRock gives companies a simple way to manage all these identities while protecting and personalizing the customer experience. If privacy controls are your thing, we can even empower people to choose what data they share with who and when. That's how you get from known to trusted. Customer identities aren't simple anymore, but the solution is. We're ForgeRock, and that's how we build digital trust.
Bottom line, everything is connected. And so the video really depicted how consumers, as they come online, are recognizing that it's not just the humans that are involved in that journey, but it's also their devices, things. It's their connected cars, it's applications, and it's microservices that identity is actually applied to. And as these things come online, as I said a minute ago, it's not just about the security element of this, and of course that's important, and of course also the regulations and consent and all of the elements like that, but it's also about digital engagement. It's about customer experience. It's about frictionless discussions and dialogue with your customers, making it a more sticky, engaged transaction with your customer base and new customers. And so it informs this whole dialogue around digital transformation. Probably too often of a used phrase around what does it mean to digitally transform a company. I think as Ismet said it, digitally revolutionize a company in terms of your business process. But not just for the old days where we thought about modernizing ERP and our corporate systems in the back office, but actually about our customer engagement and how we do that in a really unique, interesting way that is intimate, that is more informed, that also implies digital responsibility with those consumers in a unique way that creates differentiation for all of us in this room. So digital transformation is a big topic for us. And interestingly, from McKinsey, on average for every industry firm, about only 1/3 of the processes are digitized at this point. So there's a long way to go in terms of how we think about creating empowered, engaged, truly digitized services with our customers, and that we think about how we lead our industries as leaders and how we create that digital agenda that actually engages these new business processes and broadens and takes this way beyond 1/3 to 2/3 or more. And of course, the impact is dramatic. If you don't innovate with identity and digital transformation with your customer engagement, the impact on top-line revenue is dramatic. So according to McKinsey, a negative 45% impact on top-line revenue for those firms that are laggards around engaging digitally with your customer base and doing it in new, unique ways. So, you know, the unique opportunity for all of us in this room is not thinking about digital identity in its old ways, which was how do I authenticate and authorize a human being, and in many cases, my employees, not even thinking broadly about customers. But today, moving towards something that's much more enriched and much more interesting, and that is, how do I actually play a role, a seat at the table, if you will, on that innovation agenda for my firm? And how do I think about leading my industry with this same engaged talk track? So regulation also, of course, plays a role. So GDPR, we're all very well aware of not only the breach requirements of GDPR and communication therein, but also around consent and workflows and how we think about that. And certainly there's big penalties that are involved in that journey for non-compliance. But that's not really the important way to think about this. The important way to think about GDPR is how do we use that as an ingredient, as a stimulant to our digital agenda, to being a leader in our each respective industries. So what do I mean by that? I'm talking about how do we employ digital responsibility in our engagement with our consumers in unique ways that creates a leadership position for us in our industries. So how do I create consented workflows where we're empowering the consumer to actually take action and own their personal data in part of that process and do it before my peers, my competitors in my own industry sector. So, and of course, open banking, PSD2 is also a big thing. We're seeing this open up the innovation areas around how do you do payments? How do you do banking? How do you do connected IoT-related payment streams with devices that make it easy for the consumer to consume and also to pay for? So innovating around payment streams, not as just a bank, but also how you might engage your own payment processes for people that buy your products. And of course, part of this, if you're in the consumer or consumer electronics businesses, or any type of consumer touching business, is this whole concept around DTC, or direct to consumer movement, which is understanding your customer, not just leaving it to the retail channel or distribution agencies. So regulation, a big piece. There are a lot of trends that are informing our journey today. So if you move from the right side of this slide to the left and think about some of the elements that are informing our world today as professionals in serving this digital agenda, number one is modernization. So most large enterprises globally, so Fortune 1000, Fortune 2000 companies, are informed by silos of customer applications. And usually those silos are governed by lines of business or lines of business in geographic segmentation. And each silo has a separate set of customer applications. In banking, it might be retail banking, might be loans, might be credit card, it might be some other type of line of business. Each of those have sets of applications, are run separately, and have different customer applications, customer identity capabilities and technologies on top of those apps. So the ability to achieve a cross-enterprise view of who that customer is next to impossible. To really create omni-channel connections to that customer and really make that interesting, intimate, intelligent, and more secure is impossible. Because one mic in retail banking might be the same mic in credit card, but the bank doesn't know that because they haven't created a uniform view of that customer base. So we're seeing most leaders in this digital agenda for every industry try to understand, how do I modernize my infrastructure so I create a single actionable identity that I can act against for a particular consumer or customer. Interestingly, what are the effects of that? The two next circles going to the left are truly creating that omni-channel experience, also truly dramatically impacts customer engagement, customer retention, your abilities to actually create a really unique, stimulating conversation with your customers in new, unique ways. Why? Because you're more informed about how they do business with you as an enterprise, as a bank, as a retailer, etc. So creating that omni-channel view is extraordinarily powerful. And it is around omni-channel, it's around modernization. And it has dramatic impact on top-line revenue. So many times digital identity has been part of the chief security officer's purview, and it's been a security element, so a cost structure to the company. Today, digital identity is still that around security, but it is something entirely different. It is an enabling opportunity, is a digital technology that allows and enables us to change how we do business with our customers in new and unique ways. Not only human, but also IoT, devices, things, machines, and applying identity to all of those. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. We talked about GDPR, and of course the big impact in, I guess, May it is, of 2018 is 4% of top-line revenue for not performing to GDPR standards. That's great, but again, it's not really about the penalties, although your CFO might think it is. It's also about digital intimacy and digital engagement with your customers, and being, while you're doing that, respectful and driving true, call it trust with that consumer, that customer, about how your data is being used and their ownership in that process, anytime in that life cycle or that supply chain of the data. And of course, IoT, we'll talk more later in this presentation about IoT and devices coming online, but these are directly connected in a very unique, interesting way. You'll hear from a bunch of speakers on stage today that will have IoT plus human relevant stories, success stories that they're going to talk to you about that has changed how their businesses are operating. So the threat landscape, while we talk about the positive impact, is also dramatically changing as well. I think it's common knowledge. I think the quote here from Verizon is over 80% of breaches have identity theft as the core element. So I think we're all familiar with that. We're familiar with the banner children of Equifax and others, LinkedIn and Target stores and others that have had dramatic impact on their businesses because of breach and through identity, specifically identity theft and what happened there. So a big impact, but this is also translating to IoT. So as all these devices come online, how we engage with devices and how we think and secure those devices on that life cycle, that digital journey for our companies becomes all important. And digital identity plays a major role in making that much more secure, but also much more actionable for you. So let's start on the positive side of this. And then we'll get into some of the security elements and a little bit more on IoT. So know your customers, KYC. So, we're all familiar with the acronym, what it means. Forrester, of course, recent study that came out this year talks about the absolute amazing impact on customer engagement and brand loyalty when you do this right. When you put this at the top line of the digital agenda. In fact, it's semi-humorous when you see large companies go around build a digital transformation agenda. And the customer engagement element is like the fifth item on the work schedule. When the realities are, digital transformation is all about the customer and in driving engagement. Because what does that do? It affects your position as a competitor in your industry sector, and it also affects how you gain new customers and how you retain your customers. So KYC is important. I think it's really becoming a core ingredient to how companies now think about digital identity in its role in making that successful. So a couple of examples. Four Seasons. Four Seasons is well known to everyone worldwide as a great purveyor of amazing service. So 5-star type of service that they project and provide to their customers. And they do it really based on a very high level of staff to client or staff to guest ratios. I think it's around 5-to-1. So interesting, very high level of cost in terms of human cost that's involved in making that actually work. There are other companies in that same space that have put digital on the forefront of their agenda for customer engagement. One of those is Marriott. So if you think about Marriott hotels, it's a fairly large conglomerate. They have Marriott hotels, they have Courtyard, they own Ritz-Carlton, they own Starwood and W hotels, etc. And what was their problem? Well, they had silos of technology for each of those hotel chains with separate identity capabilities in front of each of those hotel chain systems. So consequently, knowing that Mike was a customer of Marriott, but also a customer of Ritz-Carlton, was not in their purview. They could not really have a good handle on that. Two separate loyalty programs. Today, as they deploy digital identity, ForgeRock in this case, to create an omni-channel, a total view of that customer base, loyalty base, if you will, that is much more actionable. You still retain, of course, the brand power, and how you act in a W hotel might be different than a Ritz-Carlton, and how you serve that loyalty customer. But at a global level, they have a much more stronger purview and a view into who that customer is and how I engage, how I might do cross-brand complementary offers, new ways of reaching that customer digitally, etc. So very empowering, and of course, it does talk about modernizing to a common omni-channel view of the customer base. The second step, though, is really important. They modernized around truly great mobile apps. And so not only could you create a registration, but when you walked into the hotel, you could have that same phone be IoT enabled, meaning beacons in smart hotels hitting your smartphone and them seeing that Mike had not only reserved a room, but he had now physically entered the hotel lobby. And if you had consented on the Smart app that they could also send you, hey, you're registered, your room number is 500, you can go up to that room and hold your smartphone, give a biometric, and open your door. So your registration process becomes frictionless and also very intelligent with consent. And also what happened? Well, now with consent, they know your movement in the hotel. And when you go into the restaurant, they know what your preferences are in food and beverage, et cetera. So it's changing the game about how they engage with the customer, again, with that customer's knowledge. But with that customer's use of their data, providing a totally different level of service digitally because of the awareness of what they're doing. So a great innovator in that space. HSBC, we'll see later on stage today, transforming how banking is done globally. So Ian will be on stage here shortly and talk about how they are modernizing their entire platform of banking to really bring it into the next generation of how do we think about banking for consumers, how do we think about retail banking, how do we think about connected money. This screen is an example of a new application they launched that is using open banking standards to provide more of a sticky, engaged, intelligent way for a banking customer to be able to see not only HSBC's balances, but their other banks' balances, and create a more intimate view of being the cockpit, the dashboard for that customer about how they want to do banking. So applaud to HSBC and great innovation in how they're leading the industry and how they think about it. From a overall industry perspective, all the industry sectors themselves have varying levels of digitization that's occurring in their sectors. One of them, by nature, because of the competitive forces and threats that have occurred in this business, that is leading the pack is media and entertainment for obvious reasons. If you think about Netflix and you think about Blockbuster and what changed there over the last 15 years, it's just an easy view of I need, as a media or communications company, to deliver digital content in new, unique ways. So let's talk about a quick example, the BBC. The BBC came to us a couple of years ago and said, we need to not only modernize our view of the customer across channels. So if you think about the BBC, they deliver digital content based on the type of subscription you have. You might have a sports subscription, you might have general news, premium channels, whatever it happened to be. And again, they did not have an omni-channel view of that subscription base across all of those types of classes of customers. So create an omni-channel view of who that customer is, and do that in an interesting way that if I do it right, and by the way, that's called BBC ID, create one omni-channel view of the customer globally. What can I do secondarily? What are the next steps on my digital agenda? Well, I create My BBC. So My BBC is their mobile app through the iPlayer, and it creates direct personalization of how the BBC serves you because of your preferences, your subscriptions, etc. And does it in a very unique way and is aware of your devices that you're using. It's device print aware. It knows the authentication of the subscriber because of biometrics, and it allows them to deliver digital content faster, with more intelligence, with more personalization than almost any other vendor out there in the world today. So that's great for the BBC. They're truly a digital leader. They took it one step further. So think of the cable that feeds your home. You know, as far as they know, they're funneling a set of digital content to your house. They don't really know who's watching, what are the programs, what are the levels of digital engagement that are actually occurring there. So they've moved it to an IoT level, and they're creating synchronization between your smartphone and the set-top box in the house. So think of the disruption that they're causing. All of the digital marketing firms and digital agencies, as well as ratings companies that have been in business, in multi-billion-dollar businesses, then their whole business was trying to assess and do surveys of what was being watched in the home. Well, today, through technologies like this, BBC knows exactly what you are watching, at least on their channels in the household. And again, all of this being done with consent. They are leading with consumer consent to those workflows and the information conveyance of personal preferences and personal knowledge and that type of thing. Truly a great leader. So we all know we have a big world with a big population. We have more devices online than people in only 45 days, according to the pundits. And of course, by 2020, it's a massive amount of connected things that are driving our world. So how do we think about that? As I mentioned, it's not only connecting humans a little while ago, people, but it's also devices, things, machines that create new opportunities for our businesses. And the key word that I'd want you to take away from this slide is the word relationships. So the idea that you can create relationships by associated identities becomes extraordinarily empowering. So old world digital identity was the idea that from a linear perspective, I could create an authentication, an authorization, a more connected journey with a particular human being, a consumer or an employee, etc. Today's world is, I want to create an association and an identity with a particular consumer or customer, but I also want to know the devices and things that are associated with that person. And I also want to know the human people that are associated with that person, family members, etc., because it's all empowering. It's much more of an intelligent journey enabled. So it's not just the who, but it's also the what. It's devices, things, etc. And it's the why, it's the when, it's the where, it's the context. So understanding who and what, so who the customer in this case, the what, the devices they use, might be a connected car, might be a mobile phone, might be a Dyson vacuum cleaner, another customer, but it's also the context of that usage that creates great intelligence, great new ways of building connections to the customers that drive new business opportunities, actually business services and products themselves. And so in the old world, we used to think on the left side of the screen about a linear single relationship about authenticating and authorizing. Today, on the right side, is what our world really looks like. And this is what ForgeRock does, by the way. We create associated relationships. We call it identity relationship management because the power is knowing those connections and how they relate to each other. And it also feeds all those things, all those buzzwords that Ismet had on the screen at the beginning. And that's AI, and it's machine learning, and it's better intelligence, and it's customer engagement, et cetera. So very, very important. And in fact, we look at it this way. In connected car, it's interesting that you can associate a car with an application in the cloud. So that's great. And you can pass data back and forth, and you'll have digital preferences that are associated with that car identity. And we do that, by the way. We do that with a lot of manufacturers. But where's the game change? The game change is absolutely knowing who's driving the car and who's inside the car and what are their digital preferences. What are their ways that they would like to do banking in the car? What are the actual systems in car at a processor level that also come online that I want to control and I want to have some empowerment to? So it's the identity of the humans. The person's driving the car might be their family members as well, and it's not based on key fobs. It's based on smartphones and biometrics and identity of those people and those things, as well as the applications driving new value-added opportunities for those companies, those OEMs, but also companies that are supplying digital technology and value into that car, like SiriusXM with satellite systems, like TomTom with mapping, et cetera, all ForgeRock customers. So it is creating related associations, identity relationship management, that really changes the game. It becomes an empowering platform for innovation, for our digital agenda. And we think about it this way of moving from unknown, simple authentication, creating some more secure connection, to known, obviously using all kinds of additional capabilities to get there and understand more about that identity, human or device, to actually trusted. And trusted meaning you understand, all of the elements that might be associated with that identity, including consent and privacy, some of the deep level intelligence around that identity and those associations of other identities that enable all types of new business processes that engage and drive new opportunities. As an example, our business with Toyota Motor is interesting, and it's about the human in the car, and it's about the car to the cloud, but we have all kinds of other technology vendors that want to be part of that journey. As I mentioned, SiriusXM, Visa, another customer that wants to be empowering the payments in the car, et cetera. So moving to trusted is the end game. And how we do that in a frictionless, easy way with next generation technology is what we're here about all today. So towards that vein, ForgeRock this year has introduced 2 new IoT-based products at the edge that are enabling that element. If you're going to do this, you can't deliver identity technology just in the cloud, right? You know, you have to not only deliver this technology and functionality in cloud, sure, but also on-prem, based on whatever business you are. Factories, banks, et cetera, are not going to put everything in the cloud. And lastly, if you're going to be relevant in the car or on the device, or in Dyson's case, on a vacuum cleaner or whatever, you're actually putting identity and technology down at the device and thing level that create a landscape, a connected life cycle of identity across that value prop, if you will. And that's where the real empowerment comes from, connecting those worlds, but across landscapes. We call it hybrid. You need to be able to exist in all landscapes, hybrid fashion, to be able to really deploy IoT and human identity across the right business use cases. So towards that vein, we announced we're part of the Dell EdgeX announcement earlier this year around IoT. I love Michael Dell's quote of being bigger than the internet. You know, that's pretty hard to believe, but the edge is pretty important because enabling processing at the edge, in the car, on the device, on the thing, is really gaining momentum, obviously. And so what also does that translate to? You got to create security at the edge, and you also have to create identity intelligence at the edge. So that's one of the things that we do today as a company. It's either going to speed up and go 3 slides in front, or there we go. So real quick example of this is Amer Sports, and they're also on the stage later today. Amer's amazing. If you're not familiar with them, they are a Finnish company. They are a conglomerate of multiple sports brands. And just an amazing company. You can see the brands on the far right side, including some French companies. You know, really exciting. But they've taken it to a new level. They've innovated around customer engagement with their sporting goods. So you can imagine where this is going. It's the idea of actually enabling intelligence and bringing online those actually sporting goods devices. It might be a basketball, it might be a Salomon ski boot, it might be the skis themselves, etc. So what does that do? Why would you do that? Well, it creates a direct-to-consumer connection. And it also enables Amer or Wilson Sporting Goods or Salomon or others to create entirely engaging applications for the consumer. So in this case, it's an example of some mobile apps that they have that provides some level of intelligence around how you're using a basketball, how many dribbles, how many shots have been taken, etc. And what does this do? Well, a couple of things. Number one, the basketball costs, I think it's $190 if it's the connected basketball. This is in your stores today. If it's not connected, I think it's $39. So firstly, the price point's different. It's a new offering from Wilson Sporting Goods. But number two, when you bring this basketball home, your ability to now have whoever's using the basketball, your kids, et cetera, start to engage and also share data about the usage of that basketball does some interesting things. It allows them to bring their friends online and share some of the data about how they're using that basketball. What happens from that? Well, Wilson now knows who their customer is, how they're using their products, and is able to serve them better because they can provide them additional products and technology, et cetera. What's also interesting from that? Well, it's DTC. It's direct to consumer. Before, Wilson maybe got a point of sale report that said, I bought a basketball. A basketball was sold at Tesco's in London. Well, that's great, but I knew nothing about anything beyond that. Today, if you're using the connected ball, they know where you're at, where you're using the ball, what ball you bought, who you are, and again, with consent and compliance and digital respect. Similarly, in Toyota, I talked about this. You know, most automotive executives today believe that their margins, their revenues are really going to be based on digital services into the car, not necessarily on selling cars in the future. And so Toyota, in this case, is a big user of ours. They've been using us here in Europe for over 4 years as the identity layer between the car and the cloud. And so as they continue to augment that and build that out, we have technology today. If you have a Toyota Camry, we're actually inside the Toyota Camry with ForgeRock technology. So a great example of connected car and what that means to the life cycle and the journey between the human, the car itself, and the applications in that car. So I talked about consent being all important. We have a phrase at ForgeRock, which is no more data about you without you, meaning empower the consumer. And us in this room as enterprise technology and business people, it's all about that journey. If we empower them in a respectful way digitally, we will see the benefits tenfold in terms of how we do our business. Towards that vein, we announced today in France that we are bringing to market new technology around access and access management with consent. So we have a consent dashboard that is launched in our products. It's actually in the products today, and allows for screens that allow for privacy and selecting the privacy and sharing capabilities that you're trying to drive forward with your customer base to do just that, to not only create an intelligent, more informed, personalized connection to your customers and their devices and things, again, that identity relationship management, but also to do it with respect and responsibility, which we think, not only is the EU leading in this, we think it's important globally, and that the rest of the world will catch on to this idea of digital responsibility actually is the forefront in the lead for how we think about interfacing with our customers. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. We have some amazing customers in France. You'll hear from a number of them later today. I couldn't be more thrilled to have you all here sharing the day with us and talking about innovation and sharing in your journey with us as well. So thank you very much. Ismet.